What's up, Driven to Win Nation? Chaz, Wolfe, and Jake Isaacs back on the mic here today. We've got some cool stuff we're going to cover here today. We've been pressing hard on business and family, a lot for our members, but in general, we've recently launched a program for kids called Generation Next, kids 8 to 18 learning success principles inside of the GTK community. And we're excited about that and all the other cool things we do for families. But that's just kind of our recent update, and which has kind of stirred up some conversation between you and I, Jake, on the family, a little bit of marriage, but really just the family unit and how we just feel like there's a lack of support. And so why don't we just jump right in here? Let's talk about family for a half second. And before we get into the support factor, but what is family to you, Jake?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question. And I know that you and I have very different upbringings around family. My parents are still married. They've been married for 44 years now, just kind of like that quintessential American family, a husband, a wife, and two children. And that's the environment that I was raised in, primarily in the Midwest. We moved quite a bit, but the majority of the time that I was a child, we were in the Midwest. So there was like wholesome traditional values. So to answer your question directly, what is a family? I think a family is a group of people that are living life together, and it looks like a man and a woman and their children, and then that's the nucleus, and then outside of that it expands to the aunts and the uncles and the cousins and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a pretty I would say traditional answer,
For sure.
like you said. Obviously, my upbringing is a little different, growing up single mom house. And we've got some interesting stats we're going to share with you guys around just single parent households and just the different dynamics of what's happening, even in the political realm around family. But, okay, sure, maybe our upbringings were different, but I think the way that we define family remains the same. And so, today, me and Julie and our kids and then the extended family is basically what you've described. And so I guess where I'm getting at in all of this is we've kind of talked in the last couple of days for sure, but then, in the last couple of months, you and I and several of our members actually around this concept of the family unit and the strength of the family unit, specifically how that's related to just, other factors. It could be the strength of our country, it could be the strength of your business, the other factors in life that the family seems to maybe be a foundational piece of. But specifically for our audience, they're entrepreneurs, right? And so we're going to just drive this home today for, this family business, dynamic that we all deal with. I mean, we've done webinars on this concept of being all in on your family, just like you are on your business. We've got functions inside of our membership on a regular basis that support all the elements of the family and kids, as well as the spouse, along with all of the tactics of growing your business. But what do you think is the most important thing? Like, what does an entrepreneur truly want from their business and then maybe unto their family?
Oh, I think that what an entrepreneur wants, they want to create a vehicle that will support choices inside of their lifestyle, whether that's time freedom or, a lifestyle that they didn't have as a child, a better opportunities for their kids. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that we interact with come from some type of, I don't want to say trauma because that feels like a real buzzy word right now, but there were things that needed to be overcome. I think a lot of the motivation for starting a business is to create lifestyle and opportunities that they didn't have necessarily as a kid. I know that was your motivator, and my story is a little bit different. We had a lot of really cool opportunities. My dad was very pointed about involving my brother and I in the business dealings. And so some of my earliest memories were going to Las Vegas and manning a booth at a trade show and, going to client dinners and, like all of those different things. And so I felt like I was a part of the business, that he did a good job of like bringing my brother and I into that. My goal as an entrepreneur for myself and for my future family is just to create options. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you're right. I mean, we recently surveyed some of our members kind of around this topic and several others, but a lot of the answers came back around freedom, and then specifically subpoints around, hey, I want to build a business so that I can eventually spend, the time doing whatever I want, but specifically insert family. And a lot of those folks, maybe had a quintessential family like yours or maybe like mine. Either way, there was overcome, or things that they had to overcome along the way. Like you're saying, I think that that's true. But I think that there's a uniqueness to maybe a family oriented, entrepreneur. And okay, so like all politics aside and kind of and maybe even religion aside, but when I look at like where strength comes from, outside of obviously my belief in God and that strength specifically, but outside of that, when I think of what allows me to like really press on a business, it's my wife and kids. But it's like it's a conundrum. It's a 2020 because I'm pressing on it because I'm motivated by them, but I'm pressing on it because I want to do it for them but I want to be free of it so I can be with them. And so like we find ourselves caught in this. I want to build something because I'm a creator and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm fueled by that. But my deepest fuel is my family. And so ultimately I want to build something that doesn't control me, but that I control it, that I can spend more time with my family. But on the way to get there, I have to use my family as motivation to build something just so I can be back with them. It's this kind of like this weird circle. You know what I mean?
Yes. Hey, yeah. Forget what business influencer I was listening to, but he gave this parable of going to like a fishing village in Mexico and like going on a fishing charter with this guy. And it's like, he only does this charter half of the day. Well, if you hired some more employees and you grew your fleet and you spent a little bit more time growing your business, you'd have more time to spend with your family. The fisherman's response was, but I only work half a day. I get to spend the other half of the day with my family. I've already accomplished what it is that you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's no need to grow the business in order to accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes we get in our own heads around, we've got to create this really big, massive thing unto I can go and have more time with my family. And I think one of the things that is unique about the message with Gathering the Kings that we talk about with our members is like, you can have all of that along the way if you're intentional about it. Right? People feel like they put their nose to the grindstone and they need to work as a slave inside of their business for 15, 20, 25 years in order to create opportunity to spend more time with their family. Well, through that whole time, like they've lost.
I missed it.
Yep. That's gone. Like,
yeah. Yeah. I think that you're right. And that's probably just the natural tendency is, let me put this down so that I can focus on this and I'll come back to this other thing that supposedly is important to me. And the concept of doing both at the same time is what's maybe a little bit new. Also, too, the slight nuance there that you gave in the parable of what is success, right? And I think that that's, a beautiful thing about Gathering the Kings, but also just in general about entrepreneurship is that we get to pick, right? And so we as a community, we promote that. Maybe it doesn't require you to have a $400 million business or even a $40 million business or even a $4 million business. It depends on the industry, depends on your involvement. There's just so many nuances there of what does that look like? And then what have you already determined that success is for you and for your family? To your point with the guy in the parable, if success is quality time and spending half of the day with your kids because you want to be part of the homeschool and you want to be part of the early years of their life or later years of their life, whatever the season is, then shoot, maybe you have it right now and you just need to reorder your calendar. Again, that's the freedom of being an entrepreneur. If you've built a business in a way that you can, manipulate the levers. Unfortunately, I think probably what we see a lot of, not only just with our members, but just in general, entrepreneurs, is that they don't even have those options because they've just thrown themselves into their business as a job and they're just working, just unto the sake of working, as opposed to thinking, what are the levers that I can pull? Some levers that you can pull only happen at certain, levels in the business, right? Like there's certain structures and even maybe other people you have to have, for that guy in that parable to take weeks and weeks off, he would have to build a better system and a bigger team, and he would have to have a different business. But if his target isn't to take weeks and weeks off, but he wants to take every afternoon off, then maybe that business that he's built can work like that. And so I think that nuance or that specificity of what is success to you and the individual, specifically related to your situation, and then insert your family, because that's really who we're talking to. We're talking to the family-oriented entrepreneur who's like, look, I want to build. I'm obsessed with building. I've got multiple companies, and I will always have multiple companies because I love it. I love the game. I love waking up with this just like, okay. And sometimes a little bit of hustle, and sometimes a little bit of concern, and sometimes a little bit of overwhelm. And that fires us all up. But at the bigger picture is like, man, if I was doing that all by myself without my family, oh, I don't want that. You can have the game. I don't want the game, you know?
Right.
So yeah, go ahead.
Just something that I want to throw in there, because I think it's really important, and we don't do a good job individually of defining what winning looks like. We talk about inside of the community of winning in all areas. And I think when you hear that, you automatically assume that like your definition of winning in all areas is what we use for all of the members of Gathering the Kings. And that's
Right.
totally not true. We want to make sure that they're going through this activity of defining what winning in all areas looks like. We've talked on this podcast a couple of times about our 2 different health journeys.
Yeah.
Your idea of winning in health right now is gaining weight and building muscle. Mine is losing weight. Right. And so, it's 2 totally different things, but it's both winning. And so spending the time to define, what does winning inside of the family look like? What does winning inside of the business look like? Those are important conversations that you need to be having with your circle, your leadership team, business, your family, your spouse, all that.
Hey, Kings and Queens, Chaz, Wolfe. I want to talk to you about something that's super important to me. We put a lot of time and effort, we meaning myself and my team, into this podcast, into the content that goes out every single day. And if you have been getting any sort of value or insight from this, we want it to be able to reach other business owners too. So we would love if you would like, comment, share, leave a review, post, share again, all of the things on social media, on all the different platforms, or even on the podcast mediums of Apple and Spotify. We would love to be able to get our content into more hands, more entrepreneurs, so they can grow their business as quick as possible. Together, we are building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are committed to growing their businesses to new heights. So let's do this. Let's help each other grow.
Yeah. Yeah. The communication piece is probably a really, important piece that often gets missed, is just talking to, and I'm thinking of a scenario just a few weeks ago, even between you and I, and it was family related, but there was some elements of my morning routine that I was looking to change because I needed some adjustment. And so we had a pretty early morning meeting on Tuesdays that was pretty normal. And I asked if we could shift that around. And so that's a good example there of what you're talking about. Talk to your team, talk to your spouse, sit down and maybe talk to a mastermind community, whatever that looks like for you. But you've got to be able to have a tweaking to whether it be your schedule or whether it be what you're building, how intentionally you're spending this hour versus that hour. Of course, we can break the calendar down to like, do you even have family time on the calendar and stuff like that? But just kind of assuming that if you're a family-oriented entrepreneur, that you're at least thinking about work time, family time, and being able to, do both of those well, typically means that they're on the calendar and specified, and you honor both commitments just like anything else on the calendar. But I was going somewhere with that, and I've kind of lost my train there. But what I was kind of getting at before, I guess, was, this winning in all areas. Okay, cool. What does that look like for entrepreneurs with families? Because like when we really think about it, I don't get like over spiritualized with like attacks. But you can clearly see in probably the world, but in America for sure, how the family itself as a unit is being attacked, right? Whether that be politically or spiritually. I'm not going to like over analyze those lenses, but the strength of the family, the family unit, marriage has declined, divorces have increased, kids living with single parent households have increased. Like these are all just stats that we know, and we can throw them in the show notes for you because we were going through a bunch of them before we started. But I feel like everybody knows these things, but then it's like, well, dang, what do we do to, strengthen the family specifically as entrepreneurs? Because we're different, and the let's say the regular family, the non-entrepreneur family it's not that they're less than at all. They just do life differently. As entrepreneurs, we think differently, we do differently, our choices are different, And so what impact does that have on our family? And then what support, what guidance, what structure, what resources do we have to strengthen our business and our family? Obviously, that's where Gathering the Kings is filling a void, but there's not really much else. In fact, I think you found an article, Jake, you have to remind me, but you were telling me about an article about some government concern. It was like these folks' greatest concern was that, given rising costs of childcare and both parents working in the home and, all these stats that it was talking about, I can't remember exactly, but their greatest like government concern was lack of family support, right? Is that what it was?
Yeah. It was an article based off some research that BYU University had done. But the exact statistic that I thought was really interesting is 30% of registered voters in the United States identify the lack of government support around the family system as their key hot button political issue.
Wow.
And so that's take political party out of the equation. 30% of people right now in the United States that are registered voters believe that the United States government should be doing more to support families.
Yeah.
And
when you think of, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking like what we have people come to us every day, right? We've got ads out right now for our family mastermind vacation, and we're going to do a family weekend later this year. And of course, our community is ongoing for families and business owners. But, a lot of the times that I'm talking to people, who are inquiring, it's like, man, this is so needed. Where have you been? There's nobody doing this. And I agree. One, that's why we've started to like really press hard on this, because, probably 3 years ago now, when we did our first family mastermind, it was this concept in my brain of how we could mirror or bring entrepreneurship and families together, and let's do it in a fun way, and let's just do it on a vacation. And then that's obviously developed into a whole thing. But there aren't resources, and so it's like, how does the entrepreneur know, one, how to define success in their business? Do they know? Are they in the season where they need to take off the afternoons and be with their little kids, or are they in the season of scaling so that way they can have an asset to pass down to their kids who are coming into the business? There's the business side of it that the entrepreneur still needs guidance and help and structuring and even community around to be able to press the issue to the next level, right? But then there's this other major component of, well, what does that mean for my spouse? And what does that mean for my time with them? And what does that mean for our marriage? And what does that mean for, and maybe the spouse is in the business also, and that's a whole nother dynamic. And maybe it's sometimes we're too much together but not enough time outside of talking about work and maybe even lack of intimacy. And then we throw kids in the mix, and now kids are busy with sports and, all the things. And it's just a little bit of a swirl. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of people are going to, just go through it, right? Like they're just going to crazy go through their business, halfway, probably not even a quarter way, be attentive to their spouse, try to show up to all their kids' games, and then boom, all of a sudden, kids are graduated and on. They're looking at their spouse who they halfway know, and they're still overwhelmed in the business, probably still, like halfway decent making money because they've been able to produce all this stuff, but they're tired, they're overwhelmed. They're just like, I just got out of a tornado. I don't even know who my spouse is. And I feel like I missed my child's everything. Like that's what I don't want for me or for any other entrepreneur. And I don't feel like there's a whole lot of stickiness for people to like latch onto and go, okay, no, I'm not going to let that happen. And I'm going to match up with other entrepreneurs who aren't also going to let that happen. And how do we do this thing together? Right. I mean, that's what I'm in my brain, just racking.
No, I totally agree with you on that, because there's no good example anywhere in society, whether it be church or the Rotary Club or the government, of families doing all of this, figuring out a way to prioritize not only the business, but the family time and being there to invest in your child's upbringing. My dad was a very successful businessman. His field was sales, but he was on the road all the time. Right. And
Right.
I was a halfway decent high school athlete, and, I played 3 sports a year, 4 years all through high school. And I think he maybe came to 3 baseball games and 1 football game in my entire high school career
Wow.
because he was just on the road traveling all the time. And,
Right.
you know, those are memories that he never gets to be a part of. And that's sad for him and it's sad for me. But he was doing that unto creating this amazing life that
Right.
he built for my mom and my brother and I. And so looking back on it, I'm really thankful
Yeah.
that he had that sacrifice. But I also would have liked to have seen him in the stands. Right.
Yeah. I think that if we could narrow down like the nucleus problem, or that maybe the thing that we don't want to have happen as entrepreneurs, what you just described is, I know that I need to have sacrifice and duty and build this thing for my family. I don't think any of us misunderstand the assignment. Okay. But we also had this inkling, whether our parents weren't there for us, or like my mom, she was at every single game, even though she worked 3 jobs and single mom parent. How she did that, I have no idea. But the dynamic there of I know I need to sacrifice, or I have a duty of providing and building a life, as you said that your dad did. But I don't want to just build a life for my wife and kids. I want to build a life for my family, which includes me.
Right.
Right. And I think back to, I've told this story a couple times on the pod, but I think it was with Tatum, my son. We were together. He was maybe 2 or something. And I can't remember exactly what we were doing, but we were outside, and it just like hit me in the moment that he was never going to remember this moment. He was too young, right? Like I mean, it's in there, but he's not going to be able to like recall those memories most likely.
Yeah.
From age 2 or 3. And we were just having a blast. And the stickiness of that moment for me was, oh my goodness, this isn't for him. I'm not here in this moment to create a memory for him. It's for me.
Yeah.
This is my moment. And then it was just like, oh goodness, like hold back the waterfalls, because it became that much more special, right? It wasn't, yes, I was there with him and we were having a great time and it was for him, but it was really for me. And so those moments, I think, are the moments that maybe your dad wasn't able to be there. And somehow, some way, I believe that entrepreneurs are like, no, we're not gonna, I'm not gonna be there for my kids and not have a lifestyle. I'm not gonna be the guy that's there at everything, but we have nothing, right? We have no provision, we have no future, we have no nothing. And not that money does that necessarily, but it's a tool in that belt, okay? And a business plays that role. But then the other part of it is, I'm not going to be away creating millions and creating this lavish lifestyle for my wife and kids, or my husband and kids if you're a female entrepreneur. But then I'm not a part of it. I'm not a part of the memories. And I think that there's just this army of entrepreneurs, specifically family oriented entrepreneurs, who are going, no, that's not going to be us. We're going to build a business, but we're going to do it systematically. We're going to do it with right intentions, and we're going to do it with clear goals and with tactics and with relationships along the way that help us build a system, whether it's $1 million system or $100 million system, so that we can have exactly what we want in our family and our health and our faith and our lifestyle, all the other things too. But specifically this back and forth between the family and the business. It's like, no, we're going to have both, and we're going to do both. And sometimes that looks like the family in the business, like you described, going to dinners and shows. And I can think of my girls just a couple weeks ago. We were down in one of our retail franchises working one of the holidays, and they just had a blast. We were in the business, creating memories, of course, but we were in the business together. And then there's lots of times when we have nothing to do with the business, but because I've built a business or multiple businesses, I could spend that time still making money, but I was solely focused on them doing whatever we were doing, outside with the chickens or whatever. And it's like, at least, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I'm just going to beat this drum as loud as I can, because I think that there's other families like me.
No, I think that there are too. And we've actually proven it, because every day a new family comes to us and says, oh my gosh, I didn't know that this was possible. Thought that I was on an island alone feeling the things that I felt. And now I have a community of all of these incredibly high performing business owners who believe the same thing around this topic that I do.
Right.
And it is awesome that I get to invest in my family through this manner. And, we are doing so many cool things for the families. We're trying to support marriages and give couples tools around communication and up leveling their relationships. You've talked about us launching GXT, and it's us trying to provide some type of education and support around the entrepreneurial children, and just pouring into the next generation of business owners and their mindset and starting them young. And you
Yeah,
know,
it's cool. I don't remember if I told you or not, but I was talking to one of our members last week, and he told me how, his kids, on this last GXT call, live call for the kids, we had previously talked about building like a set of goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, and helping them understand what those things were. And then their homework assignment was to create a vision board. And so he was referencing his kids after that call and how so unbelievably excited they were to go create this vision board. And this is an entrepreneur that has, I don't know, probably a $10 to $15 million business. He's not perfect by any means, but he's got a good head on his shoulders, and he's got a good family, and they're, for all intents and purposes, good parents. Like, they're good people, like they're doing it.
right.
And he said, he was like, first off, I don't know if I would have known how to articulate how you guys did with my kids about the goal planning and what, the difference between the two, and then creating the vision board, and to get them so excited about it, to see my kids cutting out stuff from a magazine and drawing, and one of his kids was drawing, and all these things that got him super excited, and how they were just jazzed to bring it back to the next call and show all the other kids, and this is what I'm excited about, and here are my goals, and to see them like starting to work on it. He was like, this is unbelievable. Like, I'm an entrepreneur and we're doing this thing, but somehow you've taken it to another level with my own children.
Yeah.
And so obviously that felt great, but I just think that, entrepreneurs in general, we do live a different life, and yeah, our kids get to see us, but sometimes we don't even know what we're doing, So how do we, if we're still figuring things out, how do we articulate that to our kids and bring them in? How do we integrate them or even teach them? And the answer is, well, there's no magic formula, but that's what we're doing with GXT inside of our community, is just trying to get kids around structured, entrepreneurialism, so that they can learn and they can be encouraged. They can see other kids coming up with creative business ideas and solutions, and spurring them on to do the same things, and how it's so impactful for a family just like that, who's an entrepreneur. He's got a great business, got a great family. He's sacrificed a lot. Like, we were just talking about it the other day. He's not able to come to one of our next events because he's like, I just can't travel that much. Like, and that I want to be with you guys, but I've got to choose my family that specific week. And it's like, dude, I'm not going to argue with you on that. Like, that's amazing. Good for you.
Right.
But yet there's still this connection, where it makes sense for an entrepreneur, to want to grow their business, of course, and be around other high performers, all the things that we do. But then it's like, man, what about this other element? What about my family? What about my spouse? What about my kids? The kids is an interesting piece, because it's like, it's our legacy, and not every entrepreneur thinks in legacy. I've found out, some are just, they've got their own plan, whatever that is. I'm not motivated like that. I'm thinking like the next 100 years, and like how that's my personal responsibility. And somewhere in my children, my grandchildren, and then God willing, my great grandchildren, there's going to be at least one that picks up the mantle. I mean, obviously I want them to work all together in a big family office and accomplish big goals, but I just need one more like me,
Right. And I think, you're right. A lot of entrepreneurs don't think in legacy, and the ones that do think in legacy miss the key component of legacy, which is not necessarily what you leave,
Right.
but the education that you leave them on how to deal with what's been left.
Right.
Which needs to be done through conversations and examples and mentorship and,
Yeah.
all of those type of things. We had a conversation recently about the difference between the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers. And if you want a case study on how to impart legacy, those two families are just a great example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. One got it through the next generation, not just to the next generation.
Yeah.
We had a family legacy planner come in to one of our events, and that was one of the phrases that she used. She said, it's not about getting, your resources to the next generation. It's getting it through them.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so now what that does is it opens up a whole nother conversation around, our values, how do we make decisions? What's our driving force here as a family? Which makes a lot of sense. And I think that like once you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, of course I should have family values and a family mission statement, and I should be curating my decisions so that way as my kids watch me make decisions, and then also as I teach them to make decisions, this resource, not just money, but all the things that we're building get on and on and on and on, just like you're saying about the Rockefellers, as opposed to, the Vanderbilts who just, for lack of a better term, squandered it,
Yeah.
can't just
Pretty
give
insane.
money and resource, right? They've got to have the character and the decision making and the resources and the knowledge to be able to take what's been left, but then to multiply it. It's not just, hey, here you go. It's, hey, here you go, and here's the mission. Here's what you need to accomplish. This is just the beginning. This might sound a little weird, but I was having this conversation with my then 10-year-old. She's 11 now. This was probably about a year ago. She was in my office, and we were having basically this conversation. She was looking at my vision board, and it's got some, cool stuff on there, and one of which is $100 million club ticket, like a thing that I cut out. And she was asking what that was, and I was like, well, I believe that in my lifetime I'll be able to accumulate a net worth of $100 million. But worst case scenario, I'm going to leave you with whatever resources I have and the knowledge and the plan to where you'll be able to accomplish it in your lifetime. And then your kids will take it from there, and then their kids will take it from there. And it's not just about the money, the dollar amount. That's just a target. That's just something to aim at. But I think that, based on these things that we have going for us, we can provide enough value in these ways to the marketplace where eventually what our business will be. Of course, we'll have lots of businesses, but the main business, the family office, will be taking the money and putting it in resources, or putting it in levers that move the family mission forward. And she was like, okay, like she could see her getting excited about that. Now she's a firstborn, so that makes sense. But getting excited about what that looks like as she's, maybe she's 50 one day, that's 40 years from now, and I'm in my 70s and she's 50 and she's got kids, maybe even grandkids at that point. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is like happened, right? You remember that conversation when we had when you were 10? And we got this family office now where me and her siblings and her kids at that point, and my other kids are working together in a family office scenario where we're looking at acquiring companies or investing in properties or whatever we're doing to move the money needle forward. Sure, but we're doing it unto this other specific family mission that we've created, and we want to be able to impact the world. And like, oh my goodness, that gives me chills and goosebumps. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To have that conversation with a 10-year-old, I was like, yes.
Powerful. It's really powerful. It's incredible. You had mentioned something earlier around the family being the motivation for you as a builder, as a creator, to go do the things that you were doing. You were talking about this yesterday on one of our, internal calls. You were teaching on one of the principles inside of Think and Grow Rich, which is a book that we reference all the time and we teach on all the time. And I wanted to say this on the call, and I just didn't have the opportunity. The importance of a family, a spouse, a woman to build something for, serve, all of that type of stuff, a family as motivation for entrepreneurs going out and doing something. I don't have any statistics on this, but just from the eye test, what you were talking about. Well, before I move on, I put you on the spot here, but do you remember kind of what you were talking about yesterday around that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, basically Napoleon Hill references that, without women, wealth and power would mean nothing to men. Now, this was written over 100 years ago, and there's plenty of women entrepreneurs out there. And so it's the same, but he spoke it in a frame of that there's this power in the family, but specifically he was referencing the power of the woman, this one singular woman who can easily manage this incredibly powerful man if he's given, like basically he gives this easily managed power to one woman, and how unique that is. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, no, and again, I don't have any statistics to back this up, but my eye test is what I'm going off of. The amount of single homeless men in America because they don't have that motivation, or they don't have that connection piece that they're growing and building and creating and doing something for.
Right.
And so I think that it's really important that we don't lose sight of, like, I'm going to go do all of this stuff unto doing it for these people, this family, this nucleus that I'm creating. So
Yeah. Yeah. And there's stats around income, the single man income versus the married man income
Yeah.
versus the married man with children income.
it's like
And
35% difference in pay,
yeah,
just even in
yeah,
corporate America.
exactly. Exactly. And obviously that's, I don't know what the percentages are for entrepreneurs. I'm sure it's different, but the same stair-stepped, results are going to be there because,
Yeah.
we're pushing, and I think all entrepreneurs are going to build and drive no matter what. Like, I've had this conversation with Julie. She was like, if I wasn't here, you would still be building something. Sure. Yes, I would, because that's a desire inside of me to create, but it wouldn't be nearly what it is right now because, again, there's this desire, not necessarily to impress, but kind of like, I want to impress, I want to provide, I want to, like all these things that driving force specifically that comes from that connection to her. But then obviously for my family. And now that I'm thinking like in 100 years, that's like, oh geez, like there's so much work to get done. There's no time to rest or sleep. Of course, I believe in rest and sleep, but if I'm thinking the next 100 years and how, like if I'm first generation, then I'm behind, and I'm not trying to play the game from behind, but I'm trying to put a real perspective of the work that needs to be done over the next 100 years that I'm saying I'm personally responsible for. Cool. But I also don't want that to take me away from my family. I want to do it with my family. I'm trying to build the next 100 years with my family, not necessarily just for them so they can have this amazing life and all these memories like you, but none with me,
Yeah. No, and I think that's really powerful. And the takeaway from this conversation, Chaz, is that, for the listener who believes the things that we're talking about, they're not alone, right? Like,
That's right.
there are people out there that think the way that you think, that believe the way that you believe, and it's possible because we have seen multiple times through different community members inside of Gathering the Kings.
Yeah. And maybe we can end with that. But if you're listening right now and you're an entrepreneur who's family oriented, you're down to earth, you want to grow, but the family is just as important as the business. Like that's who Gathering the Kings is for. There are members who get, value just from being around other people like that, simply because when I can see, Ross, or when I can see, Jeff or some of these other folks that are like doing the thing with their family and their business, there's no tactics that are all, is that some, I mean, yeah, sure. Maybe there's tactics that he's doing that I can do. Yeah. And we teach those, but sometimes just watching and sometimes just being in the room and watching what they're doing and going, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I used to say that on this show, actually. We did 500 episodes, as Gathering the Kings, or 300 episodes Gathering the Kings before we changed to Driven to Win. And at the very beginning of every single interview I did, before I hit the record button with the guest, I would say I have one goal here with you is to transfer courage to the listener. And that's what my whole goal with this show, or even with the community, has been. Yeah, we provide tactics. We talk about, even in the show, tactics and different stories of the people that we've had. But overall, this show, our community will always ever have, lots of topics, but one main, if I can transfer courage, if I can get you to believe just a little bit more that if I can do it, you can do it. Or if Jake can do it, you can do it. Or if she can do it, you can do it. I mean, a lot of times that's all we need as entrepreneurs. And so anyway, if you're family oriented, you're down to earth, you want to grow, you've thought about getting your family involved in something, but you can't find it because there's not much out there. Or maybe you've never thought about it and you're like, this is super interesting. Go to gatheringthekings.com and take a look at what we're doing for our community. The stuff that we're doing for kids is not associated to that website yet. We've got kind of our own little information on that. So you can still reach out though and inquire about our kids stuff. We've got some other resources that we can provide for you in that way, but we're taking this thing seriously. The business and the family is under attack, right? For lack of better terms. And I'm not going to get into who's attacking what, but here's what I know is that me and my family are going to be strong and the business is going to be strong and we're going to win in all areas. And I want to be around as many entrepreneurs that think the same thing.
Yeah, I love that, man.
Well, Jake, appreciate you jumping on here today, man. I get to see you next week. We're going to be traveling and doing some cool stuff with one of our clients, actually, and can't wait to see you in person. But for now, appreciate the value that you always bring, and we'll sign off and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for listening to Driven to Win. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.